So let us start. So we start online. I think that we are very lucky to have Alexander here with us today to discuss how can we accelerate the transition to more sustainable ways of working, practicing, and way living. I will ask for the three of you to introduce yourself briefly. Alex, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So first of all, I wish you a good meal. Good appetit, bon appetit. I had already in your cafeteria. It was very nice. So I'm Alex, and my story with technology starts when I was very small, and I was always interested to understand how things work. And the way I exploited that was by taking apart the door locks in my parents' house. But I didn't know how to put them back together again, so they were not really pleased. I then discovered the internet a bit later in 1991, and then my interest in technology moved away from just understanding how it works to understanding what it does to society. And that's the part where I'm working the most on, what brings innovation, or what is innovation, what is the technology behind that, and what impact does it have on our lives. And I'm the CTO of SAP Switzerland. And as such, I'm working on the topic of innovation, which is close to my heart, and how it works with companies, which is as well close to my heart. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Xiaocun. Most of you know me. I'm teaching sustainability in this program, Design Management International. Well, my interest on sustainability developed in the past 20 years from zero to a lot now, so you see. I thought today would be a nice occasion, have a very interesting conversation because we are all from different background, right? Alex, he mentioned about the technology, but also he's from an enterprise, so he's also from the business point of view, and we have the expert on business, and I will be like more focused on sustainability, so we will have interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to it.
So, my name is Jorge Hirter. As Xiaocun said, I'm the expert on business. What a title, my God. Yeah, without going much around it, I mean, what's my link? My link to sustainability topics. I have been concerned with sustainability for pretty much all my career without knowing it. I called it stewardship. I called it using things efficiently, avoiding waste, avoiding throwing things away that you can use, basically on the material part. The same thing with humans, right? Seeing the value in each individual human. There is no bad person in a company. There's a person in the wrong place in a company, right? So yes, now that we have all these labels, I've been doing sustainability for 30 years now.
One of the difficulties with sustainability is that it means different things depending on the people and the organization. And I think that you are in a privileged situation because you see different organizations. You work with different type of organizations that have different needs in terms of sustainability and also a different understanding of sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about what is the landscape that you face daily?
Yeah, so Jorge made a very nice point saying that he's for 30 years in sustainability. And we find a lot of companies which are actually since a long, long time in sustainability because for them it's a recipe for survival. We have, for example, a company which is producing beton, Eberhardbau. It's one of our customers. And when we visited this plant, we learned two things. We came there to understand how they reuse beton. So they invested a lot into deconstructing buildings and then milling the material and putting into new cement so that they don't have to put so much new raw material, which costs a lot of CO2, it costs a lot of energy to produce. That was the thing what we came to see, and they showed us that. And then we asked questions like, okay, how do you handle water? And they said, well, actually, we collect the rainwater we have on our site, and then we clean it and we use it again and again. So they have very little freshwater consumption, and they didn't do that because anybody forced them to do that. They just did it because to them it made sense. They wanted to create a business which is sustainable, and I like the French word durabilité much better because it means it's a long term. And they do that just because they feel it's right. And they make actually, they have less cost, so they have an economical benefit, but that was not the driver. And like that, we find a couple of companies in Switzerland, or many of them, who are sustainable, not because someone came and said them, hey, become a sustainable enterprise, but because they feel it's right. They feel it's right not to abuse resources. They want to hand over the business to the children, might be. So they have a very long-term interest. And that has nothing to do with all the sustainability reporting, which we talk so much about. It's coming from their heart.
That could be the next step. I think that's something that is fostering change, is all the reporting that is needed, particularly in terms of decarbonizing or reducing CO2 emissions. But sustainability is more than reducing CO2 emissions. So how do you see, for each of you, what does it mean when we move? What is that more?
Well, sustainability has many aspects. Sustainability is like an umbrella term. We associate it with CO2, but that's not enough. Right? Sustainability has a social aspect, has the environmental aspect, has an equity aspect, a whole bunch of facets which make it not just CO2 relevant. Right? Having a juster society doesn't reduce CO2 necessarily. Right? So that link is very problematic because that's what most people and most activists are focusing on. The CO2, the CO2, the CO2, and they miss a whole bunch of other things. Doing the individual parts is not so hard, right? How to do better economics, do better society, do better environment. The tricky part is when you need to start making trade-offs. So you see that you can do benefit in environment, for instance, but at the expense of maybe something social or something economic, right? How do you make those decisions? This is something that we are missing now. And from very limited exposure around the globe that I've had on these topics, I don't think there is a global solution, right? It needs to be local, it needs to work for sub-societies. And that's why, I mean, I'm going to make a jump now. This is why economic thinking, the way we have learned it, the way it's taught in MBA schools, for instance, for companies, does not work for sustainability, right? Economic thinking is global, the same. Balance sheet is balance sheet. Profit is profit, right? But ecology and society are not the same here than in India, than in South America, wherever else. Yep.
Well, first I want to comment a little bit on the economic, basic trade-off or something, and the ecology is different. Yes, one major difference is we don't see the price. The cost or the price of ecology of the resource is hidden. And that's very difficult. We can currently, in our current economic system, we tag everything with price, with currency. But we are not able to tag the price on the natural resource. That's a problem. And talking about durability, basically long-term, actually I used to talk this way, but then I try to inspect what I'm talking about. Is it 10 years, 20 years, 3 decades? Okay, let's say 25 years is a generation. Because very often in the class I said, okay, we need to think of our children's generation, their generation, the future generation. Okay, 25 years is one generation. If I think a little bit longer, 50 years, 2 generations. If I assume I live very long, then that's going to be 100 years. There's only 4 generations. For Earth, it's very short, and for human, we call it very long. But it's actually, in the nature, the scale is very short. Even for that very short scale, we are not able to do in the humanity so far. Okay, so this is just a personal understanding. And yes, sustainability is really a big umbrella or basket you dump everything in. And that if you look at how broad it could be, it could also think the goal, how different level you can go. We can do less bad, typical, the practice is less bad, or we can even further to push to more good, that's generative. So with the less bad, the practice would be relatively easy and easy to promote is that the less bad also benefit the economy or the business. Very often in the business, if I'm saving some raw material, if I'm saving something to make more efficient, it's beneficial even just for the balance sheet. So not only benefit for the resource, but also benefit for the resource sheet. This is the easiest to do. Still, there's a big space, a lot of room to improve for that. Because with the data, with a lot of things, I would say probably 90% of the entrepreneurs would like to do that. Because it helps them to make their performance more efficient and therefore more competitive in the market. And consequently, it's beneficial to our environment. So at least for that part, we can still push because that's a big potential.
Yes, and building on economics, so I do not agree that economics cannot help it because there is an economical interest in being sustainable. It is only not there where we have so-called free goods. I don't know who of you studied economics, but we have goods which have a price because I have to buy them, and we have free goods like air, for example. And until recently, CO2 was a free good as well. It's starting to move out of that space and have a price. And for that, the CO2 reporting really makes sense because it becomes like a profit and loss analysis of a company. And a company which uses less CO2 will actually have less cost and operate better. But that's not what I wanted to say. When Jorge, you explained about making a choice, I thought this is the space where we can come in with regulation. Because if an entrepreneur or a company has to make a choice and they don't know and they are in a limbo, they very rarely are in a limbo, but if they are in a limbo, we can help them in a sense to make the decision with regulation. For example, in building, in construction, 49% I think of all the CO2 we emit is coming from construction. So there we can regulate. We can say, hey, build something which has less beton, which has more wood. We can interact on the regulation of heating, for example. So how are buildings heated, or that they are heated in a sensible way? We can do many things. Or when we think about electrical cars, I'm asking myself, why is it not a rule that every electrical car has to be bidirectional? Because my car, my electrical car, I can only put energy in, but I cannot connect it to the network to pull energy out. And that was a very, very big issue because we use the worst type of electricity, fossil electricity, when we have network peaks. And if we could use all the electrical cars driving around to shape the peaks, we would use less of fossil electricity. So that's CO2 regulation. And the last thing I want to mention is design. And that's where I have all my hope in you, because design can change a lot in the way things work. One example I have in mind is keyboards. Keyboards is producing the scooters of the Post. If you see La Poste driving around with the yellow scooters, the electrical scooters, it's produced by a small company in Switzerland called Keyboards, and they produce this scooter in a way that you can completely take it apart. So first of all, you can take it apart. It's not glued together. You can unscrew it, and they can refurbish them. So if such a scooter has reached its lifetime, they can take it apart, replace all the parts which are actually used and have to be replaced, and then it can come out as new from the factory again. And that's, again, a question of mindset, because they just did it because they think that's right. At the same time, it makes their scooters much better because you can even repair them, which is then another topic where design comes in, to design in a way that users can repair what they have in their hands.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
For that, actually, it's a very good example for design. Of course, you have to design for taking apart. So when you design it, it has to be meant that people can take apart and change some elements. So that has to be from the very beginning. But I'm just wondering, if I'm the manufacturer, if someone bought my good scooter and never come back again to buy a new one, what happened? As a consumer, I'm so happy to thank that someone provides such kind of good products. But then I can pay, let's say, double the price. Then I'm bad.
Well, then we will discover new needs that you have, and we'll do a next generation product, right?
You will still need new tires. There are accidents in the world. There are new people coming to life. So there is, I think, a lot of economic growth. But that's a very interesting question. If we can move from an economy of growth, which is continuously fueled by growth, and growth in numbers of units sold, of people being in the world, into an economic which is not thriving on growth. But that's a very difficult one. We're not going to answer it today.
I think that perhaps what we need to do is to rethink what is growth. And the understanding that we have of growth. And maybe growth is not more sale, right? Jorge points at
maybe a reaction to that. The assumption is that each company is on their own. So if I don't sell any more scooters, it's my loss. And if you use my scooter a lot of times, a lot of years, somebody else, not me, somebody else will be selling more tires and replacement parts. So again, this is thinking me and my little company. This is not thinking in systems, right? And this is nothing new. I mean, back in the 1970s, 1980s, it started with supply chains, right? Everybody doing the little part and then not caring what is said before and after me, just being the best one at my little thing, sub-optimizing entire supply systems. In the 80s, 90s, companies realized this and started cooperating with each other and compensating each other for the benefits that happen from optimizing a supply chain. Some losers, some winners, right? You start compensating each other. So now we have very efficient supply chains. Can be better, but we have very efficient supply chains that don't look at the supply chain from him, so the whole thing. Maybe here we need to go the same way, right? So it's now we create a scooter. We are part of a system of mobility where we have the tire manufacturers and the battery and maybe gas and oil or whatever you need. I don't know, I'm not a technician, right? And that is the system that needs to either grow or not grow, but not the individual company, because then we're sub-optimizing again.
Yeah, this, by preparing this conversation, I looked up a little bit very basic economy, okay? So what typically we said we take and use and dump, that's typical linear, we know. And if the good example that we can take apart, reuse again, that's we call circular, right? You all know. And then actually beyond circular, because still the circular would make this vendor or the manufacturer somehow get lost. Either we go to the system, but how do you get also benefit from the system? There's a need for encouragement, incentive, economic incentive. Or such kind of manufacturer become bigger, become almost a system by themselves. So it's like they provide mobility solution, for example, with the scooter solution. So if there's something I need to change, I constantly go back to him. Then you would be able to a little bit constantly have new ordering. Would that make sense? I don't know. Whether that means you would give the cheaper quality, so I constantly have to come back to you on that. I'm just asking, but I know so little. I'm interested in the scooter business, okay?
But you started it off well. Actually, when I think about scooters, I have them in mind being badly parked on the on the footwalk or lying in the River Seine. So I don't know if the scooter business, but it's a good example for a failed regulation because our regulators didn't identify that it doesn't make sense to buy cheap scooters, rent them out, and then throw them into the bushes. So, but I think the town mayor of Paris still went to swim in the Seine, so she liked to do that. Yeah. I wanted to to bring in another thought on the systems, because companies won't act out of goodwill unless they have a good reason to do so. And giving the company away to the children is a good reason to do so. And what we see in the market overall industries is a movement, an individual movement by many companies to go from I produce something, I put it into a channel and it goes away. And with channel, I mean a distribution network. So if, for example, let's say Holcim produced a sack of beton, I like beton very much. Yeah? I'm always on beton. they give it into the channel, and then the channel delivers it to all point of sales where you can then buy this sack. They moved away from that. Actually, they divested this production. But what they do now is that they produce chemicals which are used on construction sites. And chemicals which are used on construction sites sell in smaller quantities, but they are more difficult to use. It's not as easy as just putting water and cement into something and stir it up. So they need much more communication with the end consumer. So what they are moving from a B to B to C business model to a B to C business model, because they need an educated end user to properly use the product. And at the same time, they get to know the end user. And it's not only Holcim which is doing this. We have more examples. For example, Syngenta has been selling insurances to farmers. So they get to know the end user. So they move away from a pure channel and big produce and sell process model to a business to consumer model. That means at the same time, when the quantities are getting lower, that the barrier to enter a market is getting lower. So suddenly, I as a small farmer might be able to access a product from Syngenta at a lower price, because they can sell a smaller quantity to me, and they can discover a new market by that. So by reshaping a business model from I sell a scooter to I rent a scooter, to get back to the scooter business, I might actually be able to sell more scooters or to rent out more scooters, because more people can afford to rent one, and those people would not be able to buy one. If it costs 1,000 francs and I can rent it for 50 francs per month, if I don't have 1,000 francs, I can still rent it for 50 per month. So it's actually helping people to access products and thus selling more. So if you become sustainable in that sense, even if you think about the whole system of selling mobility, you actually grow. You create a bigger market.
And even more systemic is that you probably need to team up with SBB. Either they provide parking or have you get on the train easily, and whether you can dock in other cities instead of return to the same spot. Because that would be meant helping a lot in terms of low carbon mobility, that hopefully reducing the vehicles in the street.
So how can we use data to start helping companies to grow in a different way, or even to rethink growth?
So one thing which in Switzerland is very prominent is open data. If you look at the open data portal, you find a lot of information which you can use in a commercial context. It's really interesting. And it was born out of the open source movement. So there we have already a lot of data. And then when you imagine you buy a chair, for example, and a company produces that chair, once the chair goes out of their stock, they delete it. So they erase all the production data they have about the chair, at least in a way that you cannot relate a single chair anymore to the production. But the data is there, or it was there. So if we would get companies to keep the information about the products they sold and then make it available to the consumers, that could help a lot. Because, okay, these chairs are a very bad example because they're out of wood, but sometimes you have chairs which are compared from plastic, metal, and wood. And if you don't need the chair anymore, what do you do with it? You don't know if you can recycle it because you don't know what materials were actually used. You can simply throw it away, or you can try to sell it, or you can pay somebody to take it away from you. But if the manufacturer, for example, would make available all the information about the products which were in, you would know exactly if you can recycle it or not. And might be they can even offer a process to say, okay, you don't need this chair anymore. Use this QR code, send us a message, we are going to pick it up, and then we are going to refurbish it. So data can be a huge driver to facilitate a circular economy or more sustainable behavior. And the data is already there, because when you produce, for example, with an ERP software, you know what is in a product. And you will have to know even more in the future because you're going to be forced to do CO2 reporting on it. So that data could be used for
So the
others.
data is already there. What will be the next step to start moving in that direction? Is partnerships in organizations? Is more awareness? Is what? What is needed?
I don't know, Jorge, might be what would bring you as a producer or as a manufacturer to share your data with your consumers?
Well, what's in it for me? That's the question they all ask, right? What's in it for me? So if there's a benefit in terms of exchanging know-how maybe, or integrating some processes, etc., why not? Right? I think that
The problem with what is in there for me is not a systemic question.
he asked me what would be my thing, right? I think one of the problems we have with sustainability on a broad level, right, is that the people concerned with sustainability don't think management. Right? It's management that does the activities, that does the decisions, that then at the end allocates resources, right? And they have a very, very specific management type thinking. And that thinking is different from sustainability thinking, the way that we hear it and the way that policymakers are applying it. So this idea of what's in it for me is management thinking. Yet we have to come away from that, right? And how do you do that? How do you translate that it's good for us into, but it's also good for you because you have your targets in your organization, right? So that translation is very difficult at the moment. Not only from understanding the value that you transfer, the data you transfer, but what can you do, right? What options do you have? How can I mean, the school here, how can we make this more sustainable? Is it just by turning off the lights and not having any hot water anywhere? Is that it, right? So what does that mean here? We have a team in the school that's hired to do that kind of thinking, right? I mean, I don't really know what results they have because I haven't seen any, but it's very difficult to come from that thinking to that of we have an Auftrag, we have a job to do here. How do you bring that together, right?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, just with the data transparency, it's the first step. It's very necessary and it's the fundamental thing. But I want to say there will be more and more data, and we cannot really process here as a human being. But how you translate the data, how you read it, how you translate for the readers. Otherwise, even with this table, will be a lot of chemical, those symbols we don't understand at all. We don't understand what does it mean to us. We see it, it's fully transparent, it's fully honest, but we cannot understand the consequence. So the translation. And I see that with the technology, there will be more and more data, all kinds of data. I'm just curious whether the future, the current development of technology, say AI, that could help us to understand the data, the raw data.
Yeah, I mean, if you had the information, you can sure ask for to ChatGPT to explain what is inside it and can I recycle that. When you have the information, because you say it's transparent, for me it's absolutely not transparent because I see there is wood, yes, but there is as well color, paint on it. There might be a finishing on it. I don't know what is really inside of that. And we could ask companies to unveil that. We could ask companies, hey, please put a QR code on the back of your products and give us the chance to understand what is actually inside a product. And that comes back to the regulation because you ask what's in for me. In that case, I think in many companies there is place for business when it comes to circular economy. SBB, for example, is selling stock they don't use anymore. So if you want to buy a train wagon, go on the SBB website. They are selling sometimes first-class train wagons. It's not so expensive if you have the space to put it. But they're selling, it's a completely cool idea, right? And they are in good condition, so you can really buy them and have them shipped somewhere where you can then, I don't know, build your tiny home in it. They sell tools as well. They sell sometimes sand. They sell stones, which they have in excess and they don't need anymore. So they are doing that already, and I'm sure they're making more money out of that than just throwing the stuff away. And the same goes for many companies. I think if they would use the data they have to get more into a dialogue with their consumers or with the end users, they can actually come to real business and can make more revenue and can create new business models than just selling the chair. And that is, very few companies are doing that right now. A couple of them are moving into that way, and a few of them are forced to go that way because the current revenue stream just goes away. It won't sustain. And again, I come back to regulation. I'm always saying regulation because I think that consumer behavior is not enough. We are not behaving sensible enough as consumers, even if we want to. So it's our role as a society to steer, and our role as a society to say, okay, this is a behavior we want, and this is a behavior we don't want. We don't want scooters to be floating in the Seine River, even if it's in Paris. We don't want that, but we want scooters to be used in a sustainable way, so they are brought to the SBB station again, and they can then be really exploited and not thrown away.
But the policy process is isolated to politics usually, right? And this is also an issue because one of the big roles of policy is to create an even playground. So if all the chemical industries need to have particle filters up the chimney, that's very expensive, it seems, to do. If you don't have to do it, you probably will wait, right? If you have to do it, then everybody has to do it. For everybody, the costs will go up, and so you're level play field. And one of the things I miss in policy is, because, let me step back a sec, people in industry see these things. They may not do them because it's economically not desirable or maybe even dangerous for placing them out of competition. Yeah? So why is it not possible to have, or why doesn't policy work with companies that see these things that we need to do and create together a level play field for everybody that does those things, right? Instead of leaving it just to the universities and to the policymakers. Right?
I don't agree to the even play field, because I think it's no, and I think it's our role as society is to create uneven play fields. Where I say, if you play according to our expectations, you play easy. If you play not according to our expectations, it's more expensive for you, or you don't have access to a market. And we're not using that enough. And we're not using that enough when it comes to new technologies, like electrical cars, for example, where charging them is a complete mess, where it mustn't be that. And we are not using that in the right way when it comes to AI, for example, where we are scared and we have very strange ways of dealing with the subject matter. But there is a great opportunity to create momentum. And policy is not only forbidding something, policy is as well permitting something or enticing something. So the whole idea of giving out cash or funding startups or funding, research, which we do already, but use this in an even more targeted way to push for these kind of innovations can certainly help, because then you have a positive incentive and you don't have only the negative incentive of paying more taxes. But that works, by the way. So we see that sustainability reporting is now established in all larger companies in Switzerland, simply because if you don't do it, you pay a fine. And the fine is attributed to people. So it's a personal fine people pay.
Wow.
And
okay.
It's actually in the criminal law, and it's not even. So that's really very, very strict. So we see that's happening. But it's not, and as you said before, sustainability people are not management people. Now we pushed it into management space, so it's happening. But it's happening purely on the reporting side.
What I meant by with playing even play field goes in that direction, creates the conditions. You don't have to react. You still have the autonomy to say yes or no as company, organization, or whatever. So it's not a coercion in the sense you have no choice. You always have a choice. But incentives are put in a way, taxes or subsidies, or maybe even access to markets that otherwise you wouldn't have, etc. That's what I meant. It's available to everybody, not only to the ones that have a lot of money and can afford to invest in those technologies. For instance, technology. Just
Just a comment to the transparency of the data. It is a movement. It is true that still there are a lot of, we just started, it's emerging. And still a lot of area we can make it transparent. What I know that in the building industry, it starts probably 15 years ago or even earlier, that there are movements for making it all the data available, even during the design stage. So building a model in the computer simulation should have all the information with the model, not just with the material, not just the shape, the force, the status. So this would be we always say this will be the future. But on the other hand, we still need to expand this more. It's just still only a few of the buildings are doing that. The percentage is very low. And then just ideally, if everything is transparent, there will be a huge amount of information on this very simple table. It's wood, probably plywood with some glue, and chemical of the glue, you can imagine, and a few layers of lacquer and painting, so a lot of another foreign language for us again. So what are the parts to be forced, to be mandatory to disclose? That will be something according to the regulation, right? Could be anything hazard to human health or the environment has to be disclosed. And to disclose and also to check whether you fully disclose, that's also very expensive as a government. How do you make sure everyone is honest? So there's also a practice like either you have the third party to evaluate your products with all the data, with all the chemical stuff, or you do the self-claim, like disclosure. But it has to be marked clearly. It's a self-claim. I said, my product here does not contain da, 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 da. That's it. I don't say how good. You only need to disclose what's the concern part. So this would also, because this was a practice I started to know back in China. This hopefully would help more and more people to give the data. Because I know even just in building-wise, to have an evaluation, have the certificate, to have the full report, it takes time and money. Not every provider are willing to do that. So if I'm an architect, if I get an assignment from the government or something to make this building as a green building as much as I can, I need all the materials being tested or evaluated as a green material. Otherwise, I have the problem. Even the beton, if I can use the recycled cement, that's the best, because cement is really a big contributor to carbon emissions. Okay, so all these things has to be dancing together, and it takes time. And what I see design here is how do we scale up? How do we amplify it, right? Even for the sake of transparency of data, we can still start with, okay, if you don't have money, maybe you can do the self-claim, but make it very clear when people read the data, it's self-claimed. That's very important, right? That's not high tech for us. And also, talking about end user, which is very important, like a building, your end user constantly use for up to 100 or 200 years. How we should use this building, even this building is well performed when they deliver the key. Doesn't mean that we really enjoy, we really benefit from the green technologies. So how to use it? That's also data and also kind of translation to the end consumer. How can I use it to be amplified, to maximize, optimize the product and optimize the understanding of the data?
And we can force companies to do so. I don't know, who of you knows how many bridges the SBB have, for example?
Bridges.
Bridges?
10,000?
I knew the number.
10,000 is too many. Switzerland is not that big. No, I think they have 2,700 and something. But, and they do have an issue because they need to inspect these bridges. And if they don't have the building information data, which you just explained, it's very hard to properly read the results because people go in and inspect these bridges manually and they have a look at it, but they only do it once per year, and then they can only do it if there is no train on the bridge. Which makes sense because otherwise you cannot really So, go beyond the bridge, which means that they have not the best data. If they could put sensors on the bridge to measure and the whole time how the bridge is behaving, they might be able to detect something which is not okay before the building or the structure is actually damaged. We had that example in Norway where we did this test, and SAP did this test with the Norwegian Road Authority. We put sensors on a bridge, found out that there is a lateral movement because we monitored it 24/7. And when they inspected the bridge, they cut down the traffic, so there was no traffic on the bridge anymore, and there was obviously no movement. When we monitored 24/7, we saw the bridge is moving from side to side, which bridges are not supposed to do. So this bridge doesn't exist anymore. They had actually to build a new one. But we could do this because we had a fully digital model of the bridge, and we could then emulate with the sensor data what is actually happening to the structure. And that helps a lot, and it gives a huge advantage, and it saves cost, because if they would have known before that there was, I don't know how to call it in English, a roulement, lager was broken, where the bridge is actually...
Spring?
No, it's not a spring, it's more, it's the buffer between between the bridge and the earth, actually. That was broken, but it was broken for such a long time that the bridge was damaged. They could have noticed that earlier. And what SBB is now doing is that they ask for every new construction to get this building information data from the construction company and from the architect. The same they do for all the trains. So all the new trains you're riding in, there is a complete digital twin of that train already, which can be used to emulate and optimize that. And again, you ask what's in for me, they save on maintenance, because now they can move from a scheduled maintenance where we say, okay, after 10,000 kilometers, I have to change the oil on your car, for example. They can measure the quality of the oil and then change it when it's needed. And the same for the trains. So they can measure quality and then change only the things which they really need to change. That's driven by data.
And safety. They prevented a lot of things.
Yes. In Switzerland, that works quite well, but in other countries like Germany, what we discussed before, might be that it's necessary.
Shall we open the floor to questions from the students? Yeah? Who have questions? Lynn, this is my walking time.
I'm curious about the SPB example. So I really like the idea of reselling wagons and kind of second-hand. That sounds too simple to me. I wonder if it is really more sustainable, because so one thing is the disposal. SPB might know how to dispose of this wagon properly because they might know better what is inside than like a private consumer who puts the wagon in their garden, for example, and then after 20 years wants to dispose of them. So I think safe disposal is important for recycling. And the other question I asked myself, if SPB can make revenue with reselling used wagons, doesn't it like create a rebound effect? Like maybe they don't put energy or money into maintenance, but into buying new wagons instead, because they can just resell them.
We would have to ask SPB, but I don't think so, because you maintain, as Guillermina said, for security reasons. And the interest is to use the material the longest possible time and not to run it down. And that's at the same, security is one thing, and operational cost on well-maintained material are lower as well. So the moment you start to not to maintain your material anymore, repairs will get more and more expensive. So I don't think that in that case there is a rebound effect. I mean, the picture you draw is, oh, just sell the old stuff, we just buy new stuff and we are better off. That it could be that an economical situation where that works leads to that effect, yes. Still, it would be better than to throw away. Like the alternative would be to trash it. And then, as you mentioned, good recycling costs, by the way. So it might actually be cheaper to sell something even for a low price than to recycle it yourself, because you have to pay for that.
So that's my thought about, like, if SPB has to pay for the disposal, they would keep them in use longer than reselling them.
Oh, but they have to. They cannot just put the train somewhere and let it rot away. That doesn't work like that in Switzerland.
Yeah, and not
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just like my curiosity.
But it's for sure, there is a very interesting person at SPB who is deep into that subject matter. I'm sure we can ask the question and get their view on that. I'm looking at it from a perspective of a software vendor. And for me, it's the question like, you have the material in your system, why do you delete it instead of using all the information you have to make something out of it, to sell it or to recycle it?
Another question? Felix.
I have a quick question.
Wait. For the microphone.
Okay. So we spoke a lot about large corporations and organizations like SPB. Are there also examples of smaller organizations using certificates and also software that you know of? Because it costs a lot to implement those systems. No?
Which certificates do you mean?
So we were speaking about the building certificates, and that they basically outweigh the cost of maintenance, or the other way around.
The building information material information,
Exactly,
what you introduced, yeah.
And I was just curious, are there also real-life examples that you know of smaller organizations implementing this change as well? Because it costs a lot to change. No?
So again,
Implementing which change?
yeah, I think I know what you mean, because
Yeah, it's
so,
a bit abstract.
so again, the data is already there. If you are constructing something, you're constructing this building, for example, and you need the pipes, and you need them tailor-made to fit this room. The company who is designing the pipes is designing them in the computer. Nobody is sitting down with pen and paper anymore and designing pipes. So somewhere an engineer is sitting and using a CAD software to design the pipe, and they create the 3D information. They have all the data you mentioned, it's all there. Then it goes into production, and it's produced based on that information. And then only the pipe goes into the building, but not the data. So the data is already there. It's not about creating something from new, because any company in the building industry who is still using pen and paper will be out of business tomorrow, because it's completely inefficient. So every architecture office you go to, they use already the software, and they create the building information. And other I mentioned Eberhardbau, for example, who do that. They don't, I don't know if they have the CO2. Yes, they do for the Circulit, which is the recycled beton. They have the CO2 certificates even to prove that. And the other thing is that as companies in Switzerland are now forced to do the reporting, the companies in their supply chain are forced to do the reporting as well, because they cannot simply sit there and imagine the numbers. I mean, currently in some areas, we are very close to that, because for some reporting purposes, we work with estimates, not with real data. But that will be less and less, and more companies will be forced to provide accurate data, which is auditable, and not just a self-explanation, like you said, but it's really auditable information, and they will all be forced to go there.
Another question? Jorge.
I just wonder whether you're aware of any institution that would form people as experts in environmental impact reduction. You see, as much as we have lots of schools that teach how to build things, is that, I don't know, Xiaocun, whether you know about architecture, whether in any program there is an indication of, given these technologies, this is the impact. Is there any way of producing a similar effect with less of an impact, something that enters in the curricula?
Good question.
I don't know any.
Institution. You mean institution, educational institution?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because let's say if I am a concerned architect formed 50 years ago, and I want to get closer to the best, where do I go to find out how to reduce the environmental impact of in my trade, or in an auto manufacturer, or in whatever else, furniture, etc.? If there is no, we need to create.
Okay, probably I just share my understanding. Probably this is similar as a organic food or biofood. Let's just make it simple. So with building, you can say, I want to make this building, or whether renovate or new building, to meet which level certificate. Like Minneke is a Swiss here, or in German, in whole Europe, we have different standard, but similar. Or in the American system, either LEED or a living building challenge. Okay, most of them, so far, they basically focus on when you deliver the key, what's the data, whether you use a recycled material here, whether even the toilet, you use the water-saving toilet, something like that. There are more and more certificates, basically also including the operation process. So during, like when we are using it, you need constantly providing the energy bill to see how whether you really manage it in the way that it was intended. Because that also shows how this building can function in a more sustainable way. It's not just stop at the time that the building finished, construction finished, because you can constantly, let's say, I open the door and have all the ventilation, everything, mechanical thing goes on, or have the light 24 hours, something like that. So there are something like that. And Switzerland, I think with Minneke, they also adapted with the more operation process. So it's not one-time delivery. And what I understand in the system, Switzerland, which is good, is that the government even have a little bit incentive for people. If you have a house you want to, even it's a barn or a farmhouse you want to renovate, you can ask for, I want to have a chat with a consultant, with a green consultant. And this will be covered by the government, that consultant's fee. It's low, but it will be somehow covered. So you have some opportunity to do that, which is, I see, it's very nice.
We can have one more question, and then we move into the closing. Malia?
I was just wondering, I heard a lot of talk about data and the value of it, and the necessity for transparency. And I can really see how valuable it is. I'm just wondering, because I've heard a lot about also, for example, AI or cloud storage, that it's very energy intensive and not very sustainable from an ecological perspective. So I'm kind of wondering, like, if you have any ideas what we're going to do with all this increasing amount of data. And clearly we should put it to the best use, but what do we do in the meantime, like with storing it, managing it, maintaining it, so we don't cause like an adverse impact while doing that or while using the data?
It's a very interesting question. So first, I mean, what we do hands-on is, for example, our data centers are running on green energy, so they don't use fossil fuels to cool, and cooling is a big topic in data centers. And then on a more meta level, the very interesting question to discuss with ourselves and our companies, organizations, is when do we throw data away? Because the good thing is we can throw data away without having to recycle it. It's just gone. If you delete a file on your disk, it's gone. You don't need to bring it anywhere. There's no recycling necessary. What we see in humans, I think, well, I mean, you can look at your mobile phone or at your Google Drive and look at how are the oldest images you have on it. Did you ever delete images? I mean, do you sit down on Sunday evening and say, okay, this image is 6 years old, I actually don't need it anymore? I don't think so. And companies don't neither, because they keep the data and they have a tendency to keep the data for a long time. So we can probably do good in reducing data, but at the same time, as the fidelity is increasing, we have more data and we have better data. We have now sensors on every machine we buy. So if you buy a new kitchen machine, it has a Bluetooth interface and it's creating data. And if you want to store it, it stores it somewhere. We will not get around it. So I think there the point, get around having more and more data is what I mean. It will simply increase with us, with our evolution. So we need solutions to store it in a safe way, in safe and sensible way, to not use too much energy. And we are going there because if you look at the density of storage we have, it's increasing tremendously over time. And there's still huge economic growth. And to get back to AI, we see that the efficiency of the models is increasing as well. So Mistral, the model coming from France, is much more efficient in answering a question than ChatGPT. So there is economy in these things, and it's happening. If we want it, and if we want to support that, then we can choose to use Mistral instead of ChatGPT, for example. But and finally, the price is very low. That's the other problem. You don't pay for the storage you use on your phone, so you will not be interested to reduce it. If you would receive an invoice saying, okay, you have images from 2008, okay, 2018, then you might act differently.
So we have students here that will be in 7 months professionals, going to organizations and try to help them be more sustainable, whatever sustainability means for that organization. What will be your advice for them and your hopes?
Yeah, I think communication is really, really key. And I only can talk about SAP and the way we work. We have several how we run principles, and one is tell it like it is. So to speak out and say things. And learn how to do that in a way which is acceptable to others as well, where actually my message is understood, where somebody else can say, okay, I can listen to you, and I can either agree or disagree, because we don't have to agree all the time. And be curious, open-minded, you said. It's one of the assets which for me is the most fun to work with. And then I can talk about the people I work with. And we don't always agree, but we speak very openly, and we are all curious to do stuff. And we are all keen to move things around. And this is the people which team up with me, who do interesting projects like we did with you, for example. And they did that because they liked it. It was something which came from their heart, and they moved forward for that. And finding an environment where you feel that your skills are appreciated and you as a person are valuated makes a huge difference. And as long as you have the flexibility in your life to do that, it's very well worth to go through these steps. And if you don't feel well in a situation, ask yourself, okay, why do I not feel well? What need is not addressed? What's not working well? Can I change it? Can I change it in the environment in which I am? And if you can't change it, then leave as well.
I can only repeat what has been said here. Maybe I can add something to the mindset, right? And so I would also wish for my students to leave here with a attitude of learning in a humble way. And at the same time, with an attitude of boldness when it comes to taking action. Okay? So learn, look at what's happening, absorb it. You're never the one that knows the most. And when it's time to take action, don't shy away, have the guts to tackle it and go for it.
Yes, I like it. It's a self-confident with modest attitude, the true modest attitude.
I like that you said first, you never know it the best, because in everything we do, we always find somebody who knows better than us. And what I see now is I have so many cool young colleagues being there, and I can learn so much from them, which is a true pleasure, and it goes both ways. And that's something which I think makes a lot of work and being together, because in the end, work is 8-9 hours of your day. So with whom do you want to spend 8-9 hours of the day? Might be with people who can inspire you and bring you forward, or whom you can inspire, where you can help something.
There was a Buddhist monk that talked about having a beginner's eyes or a beginner mind, so that you can keep on learning. And I think that learning is something that never stops and that will continue, because things are changing, because we are different, or because we need to adapt to a new environment or new organization. Thank you very, very much. It has been very nice, enjoyable, and thank you to Nick.
The online. Hello, people in the internet.
you.